Afternoon or good evening or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. My name is Mark Garretts, as DJ said, and I'm a National Floriani educator. And in today's webinar, we're going to go over some new features, like DJ said, that we've added to both My Decorative Quilter 2 and to Total Quilter. Now, before we get into the actual new features, I wanted to just show you this My Floriani Today screen. Now, you probably have seen this screen a lot because it comes up every time you start the software. Most of you probably do like I do, just don't read it, click Create a New Design. We've had quite a few questions on the forum in the last few days about where do you get to see the new features and how do you find out what's new. And that's the reason I have this screen up here, is because it's this button right here, What's New with MDQ2, and it also is What's New with Total Quilter as well, so don't be flipped out by this. So it's all the quilting software is right here, What's New with MDQ2. If you click this, it'll open up your web browser. It'll take you to a page where you can not only download a PDF of the new features, but also watch some videos on the new features. And at the top of that, you can also go back and see the new features that came out in the previous releases. So that's where you find the new features. And if you have not just started up your software and you want to get back to the screen, the way you do it is you come here to Help and you click My Floriani Today, and this screen comes up. And this is actually a little web page, so you need to be on the internet when you do this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I've already got a blank page up here. And what we're going to cover today is the new features that have come out recently, not necessarily in the most recent update, which was just last Tuesday on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. It was your present from Floriani. But we're going to cover things that came out in the last update as well as this one. We're going to start out with things that are in My Decorative Quilter 2. So if you just have that program, this part's going to relate to you. And if you have Total Quilter, of course, you get all these My Decorative Quilter 2 features as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is some new thread charts that we've added. And I've actually got one loaded down here. And this thread chart is our Quilter Select Para Cotton Poly. So if you're not aware of it, we have a division called Quilter Select, and it's products by Alex Anderson, who's a very famous quilter, and we're very proud to be working with her. And these products that we have in this product line are really fantastic. So we have a line of stabilizers and other quilting products, battings and things, and some tools and rulers and mats. But what we've come out recently with is a new line of quilting thread in this line, and one is called Quilter Select Para Cotton Poly, which is this one here, and that is actually an 80 weight polyester thread, and it comes in 40 colors, as you can see here, and it's 80 weight, meaning it's very, very fine and thin. So
hey Mark, we're not seeing. I'm not seeing your screen.
You're not.
I'm not
go
seeing.
away.
I'm not seeing whatever it is you're showing. I can see your software screen.
I'm pointing to the thread palette here. Can you not see that?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it's moving.
Okay. All right. So where was I? Oh, so it comes in 40 colors, and it's a very, very fine thread. It's great for quilting. It's great for any time you need to use fine detail in a design, like for fine lettering or red work. It's really fantastic for piecing because it really makes the seams a lot less bulky. And plus, it's great for bobbin thread. And these 40 colors happen to be also a match for the top 40 colors in the Floriani palette. And the numbers and the names are the same in the Floriani palette. So I really love this thread. It's really great stuff. And we have a thread chart for it now in the software. The way you select it is you come to your thread chart selector, and you can see I've got Para Cotton Poly selected. One of our other new ones is Perfect Cotton Plus, and I'll just select that one real quick. This one has 60 colors. This is a 60 weight cotton thread, and it's really wonderful thread as well. Runs really well, low lint, also great for piecing, for quilting, and for fine detail when you want the look of cotton. And then one of the other new ones that we've added is a brand new one, and it's called our Floriani Color Spectrum Set. Now, this is a special set of threads that covers the entire color spectrum. So just about any design that you have you can stitch it out with this color spectrum set. Now, there's 120 colors in here, and most of them are from our standard Floriani poly set. But there's 14 new colors that got added to fill out this color spectrum. So I invite you to go to your Floriani dealer and take a look at and pick up either the Quilter Select threads and or the Floriani color spectrum set. Very, very nice. And one last thing, in our standard Floriani poly set, we have now added support in the latest update for variegated threads. So if I scroll all the way to the end of the thread chart here, I apologize, it's going to take a while. We now have a lot of colors. You can see here we've got these variegated colors in here. So let me just put something on the screen. Now let's use an embellishment here. So I'm going to use these birds. And the embellishments, let me double click my magnifying glass so it's big. And the birds, these embellishments, they come with an outline and thread. So I'm actually going to delete the outline. So you just see the thread. And I'm going to convert to, oh, I got to go all the way back to the end again. I'm going to convert to one of the variegated colors so you can see how that works. So I'll just pick this nice multicolor one here. And you can see here in 3D view that the thread color changes as the thread moves along. And so this is a pretty realistic preview of the variegated colors, and it's a new thing that we've added. So I'm going to go back to the Floriani Paracotton Poly chart here, and I'm actually going to delete these birds because we really don't need them for anything else. I just wanted to show you that. And one last thing I want to tell you about is something we added a few updates ago, and that is the ability to auto-convert thread colors on loading. And so this is a really huge feature. Those of you that have had total control, we've had this in there for a really long time, since the beginning, but it's right here now in both Total Quilter and My Decorative Quilter in your preferences. And it's called Color Match on Loading, and if you check it, what's going to happen is when you load in a stitch file, it is going to convert its colors to whatever thread palette you have selected over here. So if you want to convert to Floriani Poly, you'd select that one. If you wanted to do the Paracotton from Quilter Select, you could select that one, and it would convert to that. If you don't want it to do it, you would simply uncheck that and click OK, and it wouldn't convert. One thing I want to let you know, though, actually two things. One is that some stitch file designs do not have color information in them. So if it doesn't have any color information, it's not going to do a conversion. But if it does, it will convert. And then the last thing is that it will only convert stitch files. It will not convert WAF files or our working files, because we expect that those are your master files, and we don't want to mess with the colors every time you load that. So it's only going to work on a stitch file, not a WAF file. So that is auto thread convert on load. Now, one of the things I want to show you is a new cool feature that we've added, and it's called Design Repeat. To do that, I'm going to load in a block. So I'm going to go to my standard artwork blocks here, and I'm going to go down to my heart blocks, since it's kind of a Valentine's Day theme here today, and we've got a heart block. Now, oftentimes when we want to apply some quilting stitches to this block, we want to cover this whole block with a quilting pattern, and we can do that with either our built-in stippling stitches, our texture fills, or our advanced stippling fills. But what if we wanted a pattern that's not in any of these? What if we wanted to take a little stitch pattern and repeat it across this whole quilt block? Well, that's just one of the many things that we can do with Design Repeat, and it's going to be the example we show you today. So this is a heart design, and I'm going to get a heart pattern to repeat over this whole quilt block. I'm going to do that using my built-in custom shapes, and I know there's some hearts in here. So I'm going to scroll down here to look at my heart. So I've got heart 1, heart 2, heart 3, heart 4. Let's use heart 3. So I'm going to use heart 3. Now that comes in as artwork, so this won't stitch all by itself, and you can see it's come in as a nice thick line here. In order to get it to stitch, we've got to turn it into stitches. Before I do that, though, I'm going to resize this, because I want this to be a fairly small pattern, because it's going to be about like stippling. And we're going to make it about 1" by 1". And I'm going to do that for a very specific reason, because this is an 8" quilt block, and I want, when I repeat my pattern, I want it to fill this pretty well. So I'm going to make it about 1" by 1". So I'm going to come over to my Transform tab, and I've got Maintain Aspect Ratio unchecked. And that's going to allow me to adjust the width and the height independently. So I'm going to do the height first to 1 inch, and I'm going to make the width 1 inch, and I'm going to click Apply, and it's going to reshape it a little bit, but it still looks pretty good. And now I'm going to turn it into stitches by coming down here to my one click. I'm going to turn it into a run stitch. And you'll remember that in my decorative quilter and in Total Quilter, when we convert artwork into stitches, it leaves the artwork behind in case we want to use it for something in the future. In this case, we don't, so I'm going to select the artwork and I'm going to delete it. And now I've got my stitches selected, and I am going to change the thread color from the green that it selected automatically to something that goes with this design a little better. So I'm going to select this Cabernet color here. So now I've got a stitch pattern, and it's about the right size that I want it to be. And I'm going to come up here to my Design Repeat tool. So I'm going to click it, and it's going to take whatever I have selected, and it's going to start to repeat it for me. Now the default is a 2 by 2 grid, so I've got 2 across and 2 down, and I can change that right here. We'll change it in a bit, so we'll come back to this. I can also change the distance between them horizontally and vertically, so if I want them to touch or not touch, I can adjust them here, and if I want them to even overlap, I can go negative. Down here in my options, I can change the distance between the centers instead of the edges. So the default is to measure the distance from the edges. If I would rather measure the distance between the centers, I can check this. This auto resequence by color, this really won't apply to this design because it's a single color, so there's nothing to resequence. But I am not limited to just a single color running stitch design. I could have a very complicated design in here that I wanted to repeat. It could have 10 color changes in each one. So if I just did these 4 and I didn't have auto resequence, it would be 40 color changes, and that's usually not a good thing. So auto resequence takes all the light colors and stitches them out together so that it minimizes the number of color changes that you need to do on your machine. So normally you would leave that checked. I can also offset every other design by a certain percentage, either up or down. I can also offset every other row of designs by a certain percentage, and I can flip every other design horizontally and every other vertically. So I'm not going to use these, but I am going to use these. So let's see what flip horizontal does. So you can see that the second set flipped it, so now the point of the heart is facing in a little bit. And if I do vertical flip as well, now I get this design that sort of meshes together nice. So I kind of like that. Now I could use my horizontal distance and vertical distance to snug these up together more. But if I do that, it's going to change my dimensions of my final design. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to leave this alone. And what I'm looking at is right down here and here. Here's my input pattern size, and I knew that was 1 inch because that's what I set it to. But right now, here's my output size. I'm basically at 2 by 2 inches. 1.99 is pretty close to 2. So we're at 2 by 2 inches as an output size. So as I change the number of settings across, I'm going to watch my output size until I get to about 8 inches. So I'm going to click my up arrow and keep adding the numbers in, and you'll see I'm up to about 7 inches now. Now I'm up to just under 8 inches, and I'm going to do the same thing with the number down until I get to 8 inches. So now I've got basically an 8 by 8 inch pattern here, and if I click OK, that pattern is now going to come into my design. Now I could click and drag this over here to line it up, but instead of doing that, I'm going to use my alignment tool because I know this came in at centered to my rulers. So I'm going to come here and click Center to Rulers, and it's going to center it. And probably a good thing to do with this design before you do much else is to go ahead and group it up. So if you need to move it around, it's easy to select the whole thing. And I might want to resize it a little bit smaller, but for this example, we'll just leave it there, and I'll double click in and I'll click off it so you can see what our pattern looks like. And I think that looks pretty cool to have the hearts with the hearts. So that is design repeat, and it is a new cool feature. Now I'm going to get a new design window because I want to show you another thing that we've added. And I'm going to I'll go ahead and leave my grid off for this. It's going to turn it back on, but I'm not going to. So how often do you draw something or you load in a shape and it's a little bit skewed? It's not perfect. So for example, let me freehand draw a rectangle. Okay, and I'm going to purposefully draw this not so hot, and I'm going to close it up. And so I've got this rectangle. I'll click off it so you can see, and you can see that it's not a great rectangle. So what if we wanted to square this up so that everything is perfect? I can select it in normal select mode, and now I can right-click on it, and I've got two new options. One is called Convert to Perfect Square, and the other is Convert to Perfect Circle. Now I'm going to warn you that these two items only appear if you have an artwork item selected. If you have stitches or anything else, it's not going to appear, but this works only on artwork. So if I can click Convert to Perfect Square, you might think it's going to square it so it's a equal square on both sides. It's actually just going to square it up and keep it in its rectangle shape. So before we do that, let's come over to our Transform tab and take a look. We have 5.46 inches high and 3.65 inches, wide and 3.65 inches high. So watch what happens when I convert it to a perfect square. If I click that, it's going to square it up. If I come back to my transform, you'll see my dimensions stayed the same, but instead of the lines being skewed, the lines are perfect now. Now, I'm going to select this whole thing, and I am going to go into shape mode, and I'm actually going to reselect all of my points by dragging a box around it. So I've got all my points selected now. Because I drew them as straight line points, they're all straight line points, and this is now a nice even rectangle. But if I right-click on a point, and when I do this, it's going to actually do it to all points because I have them selected, I'm going to change them to smooth points to make them into curved points. So watch what happens when I do that. Now I've got curves instead of straight lines. So I've got this kind of a bulbous oval. It's not a perfect oval. It's an oval. I might like this, but what if I want to convert this to a perfect oval? Well, that's where Convert to Perfect Square comes in, or Convert to Perfect Circle comes in. So if I click that, it's going to take this weirdness here and make it more of a perfect oval. So you can see now it's a much better oval. Now, what if I wanted this to be a perfect circle? I wanted it to be, say, a certain dimension by the same dimension. So let's say I want it to be 3 by 3 or 6 by 6. So I'm going to actually undo that change, so it's kind of bulbous. If I were to come over here to the transform, I could change it to, say, 6 by 6 and click Apply, and it is going to be 6 by 6, but the angles here are still not a perfect circle. So even though it's 6 by 6 now, it's not a perfect circle. Watch what happens when I right-click and say Convert to Perfect Circle. Now it's a perfect circle. So that's how you would use those new tools, Convert to Perfect Circle or Convert to Perfect Square. Just remember that it's actually going to square or circularize things rather than going to perfectly round. You need to do that over in the transform box. Now the last, or one of the next to last things I want to show you in my decorative quilter is something we have just added, and it's a mode that allows you to snap to your anchors and also snap to guidelines. Now, in order to do that, I am going to load in a quilt block, and I'm actually going to delete this circle, and I'm going to load in another quilt block, and I'm going to go up to my album blocks, and I'm going to use this pinwheel dance block here. Now, the first thing I want to show you is something called snap to anchors. And what is an anchor? An anchor is a point where we drew something. So like that square that I just drew, I drew 4 points to make that square. That are the anchors. Those points that I drew, those are the anchors. And you'll see them here in just a second. Now, let's say I had this block and I wanted to put a stippling pattern in that was just in this center. So bounded by these pink triangles. Now, right now, this looks like a single shape because you can't see the lines. But if I were to come over here and I were to look at what this pink area is, it's actually four separate triangles because this is the way you would build it as a real quilt block. But when we look at it on the screen, it looks like one big piece. But if we tried to put a stippling stitch, say, in here, we could do that. And I could select all of these triangles and put a stippling stitch in. It would apply that stippling stitch to all of them. But it would actually apply it independently to all four triangles. So the edges of the stippling might not line up when it gets to the edge of the triangle and it starts a new one. In fact, it's pretty much guaranteed that they won't. So how do I fix that problem? Well, I need to make a shape that's the shape of this pink section here. I don't know what we would call this shape. We'll just call it a pink shape. And in order to do that, I would have to trace around the edge of this to create it. Now, I could use my tools to trace around the edge, like my line drawing tool, and I could get pretty close. But if I want it to be exact, I can use my new Snap to Anchors mode. And so I'm going to get to that by right-clicking on my ruler, and I'm going to select Snap to Anchors. In fact, it's already selected here, so I am going to click off it because if I click it again, it'll unselect it. All right, and I'm going to grab a drawing tool. So whichever kind of drawing tool that I grab now, I'm going to use my Line Input Artwork tool. When I select it, you'll see that the screen now shows me my anchor points. So it shows me all the anchor points that are in this design. And it's doing that because I have Snap to Anchors turned on. If Snap to Anchors was off, you wouldn't see these. So now what Snap to Anchors does is if I get anywhere close to an anchor point and I click, it's going to snap a new point to there. So I'm just going to trace around this pink area doing that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and come here and click. And I don't need to do this one. I'm going to go straight out to here and click. And here, and you can see I'm not bothering to get very close. I'm just getting, in the ballpark here. That's all I need to do. And that's the beauty of the snapping tools. And I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to close it by clicking my close icon. And if you look down here, you can see I have a piece of artwork now that is in the shape of this pink shape. So now I can fill this with a set of stitches using, say, my advanced stippling. So I can come down here to my advanced stippling and I can click it. And this gives me an opportunity to show you right now another new thing that we've added is that this is a much easier way now to select your stippling and your advanced texture fill patterns. Before you had to select them from a drop down over here the first time you used it. This time, the first time you bring it up, you get this nice window so you can look at all of them, scroll through them, and pick one. I'm going to pick Stipple 28, and so that's going to put that in. I am going to change the color of it from this orange that it automatically assigned to a color that's in my design by clicking here, and I'm going to click off it so you can see what that looks like. And you can see now I've added this nice advanced stippling design into our quilt block, and it did it just in the area that I wanted it to be in. And so that is Snap to Anchors, and it's really great when you need to do something like I just did. So the next thing I want to show you is Snap to Guidelines. And to do that, I am going to switch to a design, and I hope it's right here in Design 2. Yes, it is, that I have loaded in. Now, this design is actually a JPEG image. So it's been loaded in as a backdrop. And I can turn it off by this control right here. So if I turn it off, there's nothing. So I'm going to leave it off for a second because I just want to tell you what guidelines are, if you don't know what they are. Guidelines are lines that we can bring into the design so that we can see various horizontal and vertical guidelines so that we can line things up to them or place things on them, etc. And that's what we were limited to in the past. They were just kind of there as visual reference points. Now that we have a feature called Snap to Guidelines, we can make guidelines that anywhere that they intersect, we can snap a point there. So the way you get a guideline on your screen is you come up to your vertical or your horizontal ruler. So this is my horizontal ruler, so vertical's over here. You can click and drag down, and you'll bring in a guideline, and you can position it anywhere you want. If you get it in the wrong place, hover over it. When you see that double arrow next to your cursor, that means you can click and drag it to a new spot. If I want a vertical guideline, I use the ruler on the left and drag a guideline in there. So now if I have snap to guidelines on, anything I click close to these intersections is going to snap right here to this intersection. Now to get rid of a guideline, you can have more than one. So for example, I can have as many guidelines as I want. To get rid of a guideline, simply click it and drag it off the screen. If I want to remove them all, right-click on your ruler bar and click Remove Guidelines. It'll take them all away. So I'm going to turn my backdrop back on, and I am going to talk about what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to trace the elements of this quilt block to turn this basically from an image into an artwork block so we can use it to start creating in my decorative quilter. To do that, we need to trace around these. And again, just like I did before, I could click, or in the past what I would have had to do is use my grid to do that. So let me turn the grid on, and you'll see that the grid does not line up with the points that I need. And this is another new feature, showing the grid above the backdrop. The default was, and your only option before, was that the grid would be below. So let's talk about that for a second. And before we do that, just want to reiterate that if you look at this, you'll see that my grid does not line up with the points the way I want them to. Now I could resize this image to get it to fit, or I could change my grid settings to get it to fit, but that, it takes too long to do both of those things and get it exact. So using the guidelines is a much better way to go. So to get this grid to drop behind real quick, what you do is you come to your preferences, go to view, and this control right here, which is unchecked by default, is show backdrop below grid. So when I have it checked, the backdrop drops down below the grid, so the grid's on top. If I were to check it and click OK, you would see the grid is now below the backdrop, and I can't see it on top. So it's harder for me to tell that it lines up or not. So that's a very useful feature, but I'm actually going to turn my grid back off, and we're going to bring in some guidelines to map out this quilt block. So we're going to start with our horizontal, and I need one for the edges, so I'm going to put one up here at the top. See how good I am with the mouse today. That looks pretty good. And we'll come down here to the bottom. And I got one on the bottom, and I've got one here and one here. So I'm going to drag another grid line here. So basically, every place you've got a horizontal edge of these pieces of the block, that's where you want to put a grid line. Okay, and now we're going to repeat that on the sides. So I'll do my edges first. And don't forget to do your edges because those are important points. I'm going to do that edge, and now I'm going to do my vertical ones. One more to go. Over just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we've got our guidelines all set up, and you can see it forms its own grid. And all I need to do now is make sure that Snap to Guidelines is turned on. So I'm going to turn on Snap to Guidelines, and I'm going to start tracing these pieces. So I'm not going to do the whole block for you just in the interest of time, but I'm going to get my artwork tool again. I'll start down here with this blue one, and all I need to do is get close to here, and it's going to snap right to there, right to there, right to here. I'll come back to the beginning, and I will close this up. Okay, so now I've got a quilt block there, and it came in the blue color by default, which is good for this one. And now I'm going to do this one here. So I will get my artwork tool again, and I will start up here. I'll come over in here, and I'm not bothering to get super close here because it's going to snap. Now I can come back and I can click up here, but since I know it's going to snap right back up to here when I close it, I can simply close it without having to put in another point. And I'll change that to a red color. So we'll use this red, and then I will do a couple more here. We'll do this green one. Actually, let's just do this beige one. We'll forget about the green one for now. So I'm going to click here, 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 and close. And I'll assign a beige color to that one. And so now I've got my blocks. If I select them all and I fill them all in, click apply, and I turn off my backdrop, you'll see that I have these blocks. If I click off it, you'll see that I've created them perfectly. And the cool part about this is because I've used these guidelines, these edges are all going to match perfectly. So I will be able to create a perfect quilt block using this method of snap to guidelines. So that is snap to anchors and snap to guidelines. And I want to move on now to one of the most fun things that we have introduced in a while, and that is our magic block creator. So let me see what I got going on over here. Okay, I'm going to get a new window, and I am going to bring up the magic block creator. And that's a brand new icon. It's located right here. And if I click it, it's going to bring up a quilt block. It's going to bring up the last one that I was working with, which is the same one we just traced. And this is actually a JPEG image here, and it can load in any image format. And you can see that right now I've got this selection area here, which is a nice boring beige box. And over here is my output, which is what happens if I have this area selected. So since it's a nice boring beige box, I get nothing. But watch what happens when I move it into an area where we have something going on, like down here where I have some color variation and I let off. Bingo. Now I've got some really cool stuff happening. So this is my original input here. So this equals this. But the rest of these take this little area and flip and rotate and move it around to create these brand new quilt blocks out of something over here. So you wouldn't necessarily think that this little area that I've got selected would make this kind of a quilt block. And I can see my output of that entire block here. It's zoomed in at the moment. So that's what these controls here and here do. They let you zoom in and out. One-to-one shows me the exact size. This one here is zoom to fit. This is the one I use most often because it makes sure I can see that whole block on the screen. And then I've got zoom in, zoom out, and this lets me zoom in and out with a slider here. So that's what that one looks like. I can go look at this other one. It looks the same, except the colors are different. This one, again, the colors are different. Now I'm starting to get into more variations of the block. And as I move this around, this is going to change over here. All right? So I've got all these variations, and I'm not limited to this size either. I can make this smaller, and it will scale my block accordingly. So if I click this one, it'll make it big. So you can see all the fun that I can have with this. And this is just a simple quilt block input. And you can see all the variations that I get out here. Now, I'm going to make this one-to-one here, and I'm going to stay on this one because I want to show you some other things that you can do with this. So down here along the bottom, we have our selection size. We have a colors button. I'll come back to that. We have a play button. I'll come back to that. But I want to just look at the grid size here real quick. So right now we have a grid of one-to-one, and I also have this repeat button. So these do kind of the same thing, but they're kind of independent as well. So let's just take a look at repeat first. If I click it right now, I can see that I added a little bit of a design repeat over here. If I want to see more of it, I have to zoom out. So as I zoom out, I can see that design repeated. So if I wanted to use this as a quilt block and I just wanted to butt the blocks up together, I could see what that design would look like in a quilt. So that's what it would look like. If I selected this one, I would see that design repeated. So this repeat checkbox here, this is primarily for your visual reference to real quickly see how things would repeat. This grid size also does a repeat function, but it does it in more of a structured manner. So I can actually select the number of repeats across and up and down. Now, this does something else special when we get to save the block. So let's talk about that now. That's what this icon does right here, our save. So if I click it, I have three options. I can save this magic block, which puts it in my magic block directory, which we'll get to in a bit. I can save the magic block repeat, which doesn't just save the single block. It's going to save this grid of a 3x3 set of blocks, and it's going to put it in a different magic block repeat directory. And I also save this design as a fabric swatch, which lets me load it and use it in the software when I want to preview fabric. So this puts it in the fabric directory, basically. So if I click Save Magic Block, even if I'm seeing a repeat grid here, I'm just going to have that one block. If I save the magic block repeat, I'm going to save whatever repeat numbers I have down in here. Now, why would we want to save a repeat like this? Because what exists out in the world today are people that will take this repeat design and make it into custom fabric for you, and it's getting very affordable. So there's lots of different sites out there. An example would be spoonflower.com, where you could send this repeat design to them and they would turn it into fabric for you. So this is not only great for making a quilt block that you would bring into the software and stitch, but you could also print fabric. If you wanted to do a single block, so let me go back to a grid size of 1 by 1, and you wanted to build this into a quilt and not actually quilt it, you just wanted to print it, you could get some inkjet printer fabric and you could print this one block out from just the magic block that you saved, and then you could sew it right into your quilt if you wanted to stitch it. This block, probably not that hard to stitch, but if you get into some more variations and things, this one might be a little bit more difficult, for example, or this one. And when we get into some curved things, you might want to print it rather than stitch it. But the good news is for those of you that have Total Quilter, it can handle those curves in an Applic quilt block. So this is the Magic Block Creator in a nutshell. I want to show you one other fun thing, and that is that when you start it up, you're going to go to the Magic Block directory, and I'll show you that here. And it's in this Magic Block directory, and we have given you hundreds of magic blocks to choose from. And when you save your own magic block, it's going to go into this directory. So a lot of these we started with real quilt blocks, and a lot of them we created from existing quilt blocks. But you're not limited to a quilt block. You could load in an image of your grandkid. And of course, that would be more of a printing thing rather than a quilting thing, but you could print it out, have him mirrored around or whatever. You could do your dog, but you can also do some of the other things. Like let me go up here and select an images directory. So this is the standard images directory we give you in the software. And I'm just going to select this flag. Now, you might not think that this design would make very interesting quilt blocks, but you'd be wrong. Watch this, okay? So look at these cool things that I've created, and this is just the default. Okay, so I can move this around. I can resize it. I can get some really nice looking blocks here, and let me zoom out so you can see that one doesn't look so hot. But let me select that one. So you can see I've got these really cool things. Then if I repeat it and look at it as fabric, let me zoom out here. You can see that I get these really, really interesting designs out of just a simple little design like this. And this, I'm going to warn you, is a real time sink. You can spend hours and hours playing with the Magic Block Creator, but it's a fun new tool that we gave you. And while we're here, let's just take a look at what the colors do. So let me actually select this one, and we'll turn off repeats, and we'll zoom in, and we'll go full size here. And I'm just going to click Colors, and this allows me to selectively change the hue, the luminance, which is basically the amount of brightness, and then the saturation, which is the amount of color. And if I want to, I can go to grayscale or black and white. So let's just see what hue does. If I click it, it's going to change the color. And then if I slide this along, I can get a lot of different color variations on it. So let me see what it looks like over here. So that's pretty much back to the original. If I go over here, it's way different. I'll show you what luminance does. Let me just slide this box out of the way here. Luminance actually changes the brightness of it. So you can see there it's kind of washed out. And if I come down here, it gets dark. And you're seeing some artifacts there because of my screen, so I apologize for that. And you can also change the saturation, and what this does is it just controls the amount of color there. So if I go very, very light, or that's actually very saturated, if I come here, it starts taking the color out. And if I go to black and white, it will just take all the color away, but the shades of gray are still affected up here by this control. So that's what that does. And I'm going to actually uncheck all of these to go back to my normal colors. And the last fun thing I want to show you here in the Magic Block Creator is the randomizer, which is this play button right here. If I click it, it is going to cycle through random sets of color for me or sets of areas. And it's using the same block size right now and just moving around. And I am seeing whatever I have selected. So I'm always seeing this mode right here, style number 4 over here. And if I like something, I can stop it. If I decided that I like the one in front of it better, I can see that one. But I've also got some controls here. So I can click my play settings here, and I can have it randomly change the size. I can have it change the method, which is this, so it would randomly cycle through these guys. And I can have it randomly cycle through colors and saturations and luminances if I want to. So I can get a lot of different variations on the play. So that is the Magic Block Creator, and it is a lot of fun. And that's asking me to save it. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to save that particular block. So that wraps up my decorative quilter new features, and we're going to go on to total quilter new features now. And to do that, I'm going to bring in a block. So I'm going to bring in a Applic block, and I'm going to use this basic block 30 to start with. And the first thing I want to show you is a new thing that we have done down here in the Design Colors display. So it used to be that if we had a thread color, you would see a number in here, but if we had a backdrop color or a fabric color, it wouldn't tell you. It would just be a color. Now we've put an F in here, and this gives you an indication that this is either a fabric or a fill color up here in my design. So you can see I've got this beige and this red, and those are the fills in my design, whereas this number 1, that's the black color of my binding stitches here. So that is the new color palette display, and there's some other things that are happening with that too. Because if I wanted to reassign, say, the stitch colors, I have a couple different ways I can do it. I can select them all with my Applic block selection tool, which is right here. So I could select that one, and I could change its color. But over here in my sequence view now, I have the ability to expand this block and select the lines. And now if I make a change to either the fill or the color, it will change it. So if I want to change that color to, I don't know, let's change it to this Cabernet color here. If I click it, it is going to change it to that color. All right. So did it change it? DJ, it didn't change it. What happened? There it goes. All right. So it changed it. Maybe I had the wrong thing selected. So now it's that color, and now you can see it's color number 1. There's a couple other ways that I could change it. So we'll get to that, but I'm going to undo that change to make it back to black. And that is a new thing that we've added the ability to change it over here. The other thing now is if I didn't have that selected over here, if I just had this selected and I clicked on a color, it will give me the option of either assigning it to the line path or putting it in my design palette. So I have those two options now, assigning it to the line path. If I were to click a whole block and I click that color, it would give me the option to assign it to the fabric color or the design palette. So that's kind of new as well. And like before, I have the ability to assign a fabric in here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to select this block up here, and I assign a fabric by clicking here my fabric button in my properties box. And let's just put this red fabric in there and click OK. And now instead of a flat fill, I've got a fabric fill. And I want to show you something else that's new, and that is if I now right-click on this, I have the ability to copy that fabric. I'm not copying the block. I'm not copying the size. I'm simply copying the fabric that's here. So now if I want to paste the fabric in over here, I can right-click, and I have the ability to paste that fabric. So it's just going to paste that fabric. Let me try it one more time. I used the wrong mouse button. Okay, so I pasted that fabric in. So I could do that a block at a time. I also now have the ability to control select my block. So now I've got these 3 selected, and if I right click and say paste fabric, it'll paste them into there. Similarly, if I select this line of stitches here and I change my binding motif, and this is another new thing that we've added, we've got all these Applic binding motifs as a selection here in my stitch properties, and these were custom created to be good for Applic binding. I could select another one, like let's select 18 here, and I'll leave it at a 6mm size, and I'll go ahead and apply that. So it applied it here. I'll turn on 3D so you can see it, and I'll click off it so you can see it. So now I've got that stitch pattern applied there. If I want to repeat that, I can do the same kind of thing I just did with my fabric. So I can right-click on it, and I can say copy the stitches, and now I could select this one. I can hold down Control and select that one, and select my last one, and I could right-click and I could say paste the stitches. So I don't have to go in and apply those stitches all individually. So that is another cool new feature that we have added, the copy-paste fabric. You can do the fills as well as the lines. So what do I mean when I say you can do a fill? Well, if I select this block here and I were to apply an advanced stippling fill to it, like let's apply, oh, I don't know, where's one that kind of goes with this block? I had one. Oh, you know what? I'm going to use an advanced a texture fill instead. I'm going to use 270 here, and I'll apply it to that block. And I'm going to make it a beige color so you can see it. And you can see here when I click on it, now it's wanting to know, do I want to apply this to the fabric color or the fill paths color? So I'm going to say, yes, I want to do the fill paths. So now I've got that design in there, and if I want to copy that to here, I can right-click, I can select it, right-click on it, and I can say copy the stitches just like I did before, except now it's copying my fill stitches, and I can click here, 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 and here, and I can right-click and say paste those stitches, and it will paste that stitch pattern into those blocks. So that is the new copy-paste method and the new way of selecting everything over here in our sequence view. So I am going to now get a new design window because I want to show you another new feature, and I'm going to load in a block, and I'm going to use my Applic block selector, and I'm going to use basic block 21 because this one is fairly easy to see what's going on. And this consists of these 4 triangles and this center diamond or square here. Now, I can apply a pattern to this square. Like say, for example, if I were to take my select tool and I just simply select this inner square and I come down here to my texture fill and I use that same pattern, I could apply that in here. And let me pick a color so you can see it. Let me pick that beige color, and I'll click off so you can see what I did. Did I actually select it? Hold on. Fill paths color. Okay. Click off it. There we go. Okay. So you can see that pattern in there. Now, this pattern is a cool pattern, but what if I wanted to turn this pattern on point? What if I wanted the points of this pattern to line up kind of with the way this diamond is in here? If I was doing this as an artwork block, I could select my shape tool and I could change the angle of this pattern. So I could move the angle around so it rotates so it does what I want it to do. Unfortunately, that mode is not available when you're working with a fill pattern in an Applic block because the shape tool in an Applic block does something different. It moves the lines of the block around the edges of the block piece. So how do we solve that problem? Well, I'm actually going to delete those stitches, so let me select them, and I'm going to actually delete them. And the way you delete them is you can't press the delete button. You have to turn them from stitches into something else, and what that something else is artwork, which is where they started out. So now they're gone because they're artwork, and it essentially deletes them. But what if I wanted to fill this area? Now I could take my Snap to Anchors tool and I could make a new piece of artwork for here, but I've got a shortcut way of doing that. So if I select the block with my normal select tool and I right click on it, I now have 2 new options. One is Get Fills as Artwork and Get Lines as Artwork. So this gets the stitch lines as artwork and this gets the fills as artwork. So when I have artwork pieces, let me just do this as get fills as artwork. It's going to take all of those fills and bring them in, and it's going to put them right on top. If I drag over it, you'll see that my original design is there, but now I have these new artwork pieces that are exact duplicates of these, but they're now independent artwork. They're no longer part of this Applic block. What that means is now I can manipulate them independent of the block. So I've got everything in the block, and I don't want all of it. All I want is this purple diamond. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to select these beige pieces that I don't want, and I'm going to delete them, leaving me with just this piece. Now I can refill it with that texture. So let me refill it with that texture. Let me change the color again. And now if I go to my Shape tool, I can change the angle. So I'm going to move my angle so that it goes across rather than, or it goes at a diagonal like this rather than straight across. And I'm going to try and get it as good as I can here. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to right click now to lock that in. If I click off of it in the normal select mode, you'll see that I now have my stitches matching the angle of that pattern. Now, one thing I want to let you know is that when I've done this, I've created a separate stitch object down here. And in the past, if I had a separate stitch object and I did an Applic block export, this would not come along for the ride. I would have to go and open up the stitch file and plug this in and then resave it. We've added a new mode so you don't have to do that. And this applies to what I've just created here. It would also apply to any other way you got a normal stitch file in here. So if you merged in a pattern or you put in one of the built-in patterns or the decors or anything, the same technique applies. So what we want to do is we want to attach this stitch object to this quilt block. And you can see I've got a new section down here in my quilt block called Attached. There's nothing there right now. I still have this artwork here. I'm going to actually delete that artwork because I don't need it anymore. I've got this stitch pattern. In order to attach it to here, what I have to do is select what I want to attach. And I need to hold down Control and select the block. And when I do that, this icon right here lights up. So let me click off so nothing is selected. You'll see that right now it's unlit. If I click this, it's still unlit. If I just click this, still unlit. I need to click both of them for it to light up. And once I do that, I can click this and it will attach it to the block. And now you can see that that design is in here attached to, actually you can see it right here. It's attached to my design in my block. So now when I export this, all of these stitches are going to export together. If for some reason I want to deattach it, I simply select both again, and then I come up here to my deattach icon and click it, and it will unattach it from the block. So that's the new attach mode and our new get artwork and lines mode. So I'm going to go back to this block right here, actually, excuse me, this block right here, and we are going to show you some new things in our Export Applic block that we have added. So in order to export an Applic block, I have to select the block. So I'm going to do that with my normal selection tool here, and I'm going to select it here. So I've got it selected, and now my Export Applic block icon is lit up. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to show you the new things that we've added. So let's just go over what's here. So here you would have to give it a project name. Here is the directory or folder where it's going to be stored. If you want to change it, you can click these and store it wherever you want. I like to leave it right here at the default, which is C. Floriani Designs Applic. Here's your seam allowance. So you can change this, and don't forget we're always going to add a seam allowance out here to the Applic blocks, and this is where you set it. The spacing, this controls the spacing between the objects for the output file when you get cut files. So we're going to leave this at its default. If I want to change it, I can. And I would have to check this box in order to do it. This next area here, we've added one new thing, but let's just talk about what it does. If I want my stitch files to come out, I would leave this checked. I usually do. And here would be my stitch file format, so I could change to any stitch file format I want. I can also have this box checked, which is save as our WAF or our working file. I always like to leave this checked because if I want to go back and make changes to it, I can just come back here to my WAF file. And this last one, this is a new one. This is as digitized. What this does is that if you drew in the lines of your block and you wanted it to stitch out in the exact order that you digitized it, that's what this box would do. It would just respect the order that you created it in and stitch it out in that order. And that's useful sometimes if you want to control the order in which it stitches out. Normally this is unchecked, and what happens is the software tries to optimize the stitching sequence for everything in the file so that it minimizes the number of cuts and jumps and trims. And the reason that we do that is because oftentimes you'll want to stitch out an Applic quilt block using a quilt as you go technique where you've got the top fabric, the batting, and the backing all in the hoop. And so you want whatever comes out on the back of your quilt to look as nice as the top. And by optimizing the sequence, you have a much better shot at that happening. And so that's when you would leave this unchecked unless you optimized it manually yourself and you knew that was going to happen. Also, we've got cut files here. This really hasn't changed too much. Let me just explain real quick what it does. So you have a choice of formats. You can go with SVG, which is your standard scalable vector graphic that just about any software and any cutter can use. Or you could switch to FCM, which is what you need for your brother's scan and cut. You can change your page size from 12 by 12 to 12 by 24. So this determines how many cut files it tries to fit on a page. You can click Import Files. Now, what does that do? When you click it, when we click Export, it's actually going to open up all of the cut files right in My Decorative Quilter, or actually Total Quilter. It's going to open them up in there. Excuse me. And that's really useful because oftentimes you want to do a better job of optimizing what goes on a page than the automatic tool does. Sometimes you can squeeze things together, flip things around a little bit better and do that. So that's what import does. It's going to open up a WAF file for every single cut file that gets created on the page. So it's going to open up that page. And then save the cut files as a WAF is also useful if you want to go back and manipulate them or re-export them in a different format. This is brand new here, the image. If I click it, it will output an image of this quilt block. And we have some options. We can change the file format. We can have a BMP, a JPG, or a PNG. We can change the dots per inch, so this is how much resolution you get. And you can choose whether or not to draw in the stitches or just show you the fabric in the background. If you do draw in the stitches, then you'll have the option to draw it in 3D. And whether or not you want to draw in the seam allowance, which would just draw a line around the outside showing you where the seam allowance would be. And lastly, we have our Cut Preview button. So if you click that, it's going to bring up your cut preview, showing you a little window here of what the total block would look like. And then next is going to show you your stitching sequence. And then our next one is going to show you the fabric cut pieces. And these are not going to be to scale. It's just going to show you the pieces. And that's it. If you check this one for manual cutting and click Preview, you'll get something different. So here you'll get that same preview window. Here you'll get the same color analysis or stitching order. But now you're going to get these block pieces in the actual size because the idea is that you're going to print these out either on template tearaway for cutting right side up or on Applic Wonder if you want to make an applique directly from these. Either way you want to do it, you're going to print these pages out on that material, so these need to be the exact size. And it couldn't fit the 4 onto here, so it's got one extra. And then you're going to see here are our white pieces that we're going to cut out here, and these it could all fit on one page. Now, right here is your settings. So this is where you would select your printer. And if you're going to print this out on template tearaway, you don't want to do anything special. And template tearaway is this sticky material that you would put down on your quilt block, sticking it on the top, on your fabric rather, stick it down, and then you would use your rotary cutter to cut around the edges of it, and you can reuse that piece to cut more pieces. So it's a nice sticky template material. But you could also print this on Applic Wonder, fuse it to the back of your fabric, cut it out, and have your applique pieces ready to go, rather than doing it as a separate step. If you do that, however, you're going to print on the back side of Applique Wonder. So Applique Wonder needs to be printed in reverse because you're going to print on the back side. The way you would do that is you would go here to your properties, and almost all printers these days have a way to do that. In this particular printer, it's right here, reverse print. Some call it transfer mode because you want to print in reverse when you're doing inkjet transfers and things like that. If your printer doesn't have that, what you would want to do instead is you would want to, instead of using this to print it, you would want to use this option here of importing the files into the software. Use a flip horizontal here to flip them around, and then do the normal print preview up here to print those out to your Applique Wonder. So that is all of the settings in our new Export Applic Quilt Block dialog. Now, one thing we added in the prior update is a new output mode called Faux Piecing, and it's right here, Export Faux Piecing. And what faux piecing is instead of making this particular quilt block with all of these squares of fabric and different colors, what we would do instead is we would output this as a single piece of fabric, and we would stitch in here with colored thread in order to simulate the pieces of this quilt block. So let's change this block up to do that. So right now I've got beige thread in here. I don't want that because I'm going to simulate those red block pieces. So I'm going to select all of my stitches here, all of my fills, and I'm going to change them to this Cabernet red by clicking right here. So I've just changed them all to red, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this red fabric to beige, because the idea is we're going to put this all out on one piece of beige fabric. So I'm going to do that by coming here to my selection tool, and I am going to select this block, and I am going to put in a new piece of fabric. And I'm going to do that by coming over here. I'm going to right click and say copy the fabric. Now I'm going to come over here, I'm going to control select all of these, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say paste the fabric, and now everything is beige. If I click off it, you can see that I've got that red there on top to show me what that's going to look like. Now I've still got my decorative stitches in here. I could leave these in here and they would stitch out fine, but I don't have any pieces of fabric to actually tack down. So I could just eliminate these stitches by turning them into artwork, but I might want a nice run line to define the edges of these blocks better. So let me do that. I'm going to actually select all of my lines. I'm going to hold down Control and select all of my lines, and I am going to convert them into a run stitch. So I'm going to do that right here with my run stitch one click. So I'm going to convert them into a run stitch, and I'm going to change the color of them to this red. So I'm actually going to have to reselect them all. Hold on a sec. Let me just actually select all my lines here, and I'll change them into red. And now if I click off it, you'll see that I have to do that over here. Okay, you'll see that I've got a nice run stitch outline going around all of those blocks. So this would be a great block to faux piece. To get it to faux piece, what I would do is I would select it in normal select mode. So I'm in normal select mode. I would come here to my export faux piecing block, and when I click it, you'll see that this export dialog is much more simplified. So I've got my same design folder and my same seam allowance section, but that's it, because what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to output this stitch file, and if I want to also a WA format, and I also have this as digitized. If I go to my print preview here, you'll see that this is my stitch file. If I go next, here's my threads, and that's it, because it assumes that I am going to stitch this out on a single piece of fabric that I'm going to hoop up. Let's put my seam allowance in here, but I have no cut files or anything like that because I'm just going to stitch this block out. But it's a real easy way to do that, and it's called export faux piecing. Now the last thing I want to show you is I'm going to load in that block again. So I'm going to get a new design window. I'm going to open up that very, very same block. I'm not going to do any changes to it this time because we're actually running a bit over our hour time slot here, but I promise we'll be done really quickly here because this is a really new cool mode we added, and it is called the Applic block mode. So as you know, when you export an Applic quilt block, what happens is that you get this piece of fabric, this piece of fabric, this piece of fabric, this piece of fabric, and they're all individual pieces. And then they all go down on a base piece of stabilizer, and usually that's nylon no-show mesh, which becomes your base fabric. And then these get stitched down to that to create the quilt block design. And that's a very, very good method, and that Floriani nylon no-show mesh makes a very sturdy and strong base fabric, and it really works extremely well for a finished quilt. But we have some quilters that requested that instead of using a piece of stabilizer like that, they would prefer to have a contiguous piece of one of these colors underneath and then have all these other pieces get stitched down on top of it, more like a traditional applique rather than an applique quilt. So we've given that mode to you, and it is right here, and it's called Export Applique Block. So with your block selected in normal select mode, you can click Export Applique Block, and this is going to give you something that looks very, very similar to our Applic quilt block export with one difference, and that's right here, the background fabric selector. So what you would do here is you would click on this to select the color that's going to become your base background fabric. And here I've only got two colors, so it's offering me these two choices. Now it automatically selected the red, which is the most logical choice, but if I wanted to put the beige on the back and put the red on the top, I could, but we'll go ahead and leave the red that way. And what this says is that instead of putting out individual red squares and individual beige squares, it's going to give me one big square of red and a bunch of individual beige squares. So if I preview this, you will see that here's my overview picture, here's my sequence of stitching, and lastly, here are the pieces for the beige, but here is my single big piece for the red. And again, this one's not to scale. If you want to print it to scale, then instead you would do for manual cutting and print preview, and then it would print it out to scale. So you can see these are bigger now. And this one's not even going to fit on one page. You'd have to tape those pages together to get it to be one big piece for a template. So that is the export applique block as opposed to Applic quilt block. And again, everything else is the same here with the exception of you need to select your background fabric, and it is not going to give you individual pieces for that color. It is only going to give you the individual pieces for whatever needs to go on top of that base background fabric. So that wraps up all the new features in My Decorative Quilter 2 and Total Quilter, and I hope it wasn't too confusing. And DJ, are you still there? Did I put you to sleep? DJ?
No, I'm
DJ?
still here. Sorry, I had to unmute it. So
Okay.
no,
Did I
we're
miss anything?
No, it was very good. You touched on all the different features, so it was really good.
Great. Seems to me there's something I missed, but oh well.
Well, we've
Look at the
added so
website.
many things, so.
Yeah. All right. So you want to conclude with any finishing remarks, or
Nope,
are we
I'm
ready
good.
to sign off?
We're
Okay.
ready to sign off.
Okay.
So thank
So
you everyone for attending, and thank you, Mark, for doing a wonderful job.
all right. Just let me just say, if you